Crushing the cultural Marxists, breaking the grip of corrupt oligarchs, and taking back our country through America first. Here's your host of Liberty and Reality, John Henson.
Well, Colorado, what happened? Another one of these Democratic Socialist America Marxists got elected, at least won their primary against a 19-term congressperson. And they got picked in the primary, so they're going to be running in the general election representing Colorado. And I don't know what happened to Colorado. Colorado's a beautiful state. I know it's a blue state. It's not even, as far as I know, that heavily blue, at least not by the election numbers, but it's blue enough. God, it's such a beautiful place. Right there, just south of Wyoming and out in the Midwest, out in cornfield country. It's amazing. It's amazing. And this trend is just going to continue with the Democratic Party. So I don't know what to tell you. There's room over here on America First for you, and maybe you should start thinking about getting on that train, because this isn't good for any of us. Welcome back to Liberty and Reality. And today we're going to talk about some of these concepts I've been going over in the past. When we talk about these globalist oligarchs, I'm going to kind of fill in some of the blanks here, provide some of the facts to back up what I've been saying about this class of globalist oligarchs. Because a lot of people act like this is a conspiracy theory, that these people are trying to take control of the system. And I'm going to do my best today to convince you that that's not true. So, and if you pay attention to the mainstream media, which is owned largely by this same class of people, at least through different assets, these companies are owned by conglomerates, and they just go up one step at a time, and until you reach the top, you'll have a board of directors and a CEO that's calling the shots. But they're all push the same ESG, DEI bullshit down through the company ranks, and they're pushing the same Marxist story everywhere. So you hear the media lie every day, and they tell you the pain you feel, these unaffordable prices, unaffordable housing, the lower quality goods and services you get today, because they definitely are lower quality. They're all a failure of the free market. And this is just bullshit. The problem is we don't live in a true capitalist economy anymore. The national debt is approaching 40 trillion, and we're living in a command economy now because of that debt, because of the way our monetary system is managed. It's basically a socialist system already. It's a system that Marx would make Marx and Lenin blush, most likely. And here's the trick to the system. The money, it's a redistributionist system. At least what the politicians tell you is it's redistributionist. Progressive tax system. All these things try to convince you of, but they're lying. It's not true. The trick is the money is not being redistributed down. It's not going to the working class. It's being pushed up to a tiny class of global asset holders in the oligarch class. And think about how your hard-earned money is managed. It gets taxed over and over. Your fuel is taxed. Your property is taxed. Every time you buy something, it's taxed. Your income is taxed. Your inheritance is taxed. Everything you own through your hard-earned labor is taxed. Many times you don't even know what's happening. And for example, Washington State, where I live, the state constitution bans an income tax, but don't let that stop the politicians. The state gets around that by forcing businesses to pay a payroll tax. The payroll tax is a tax based on what every one of their employees earns. So it's a reverse income tax. Money that those companies could be paying their employees, instead they're paying to the state. And of course, the state will lie and say the companies could pay more, but they're greedy. No, the state is greedy. The state is taking that money, and it shows out here in the economy. So instead of the money going to your paycheck, your employer has to send it to the government, and your take-home pay goes down. So while you carry that tax burden, the oligarchs just get richer. And it's just massive government spending that fuels their assets. It's inflation. And too bad you cannot move to one of these tax shelter nations. They can. You have to have wealth to do that. Before we go further, I want to define what an oligarch is, because it's not every billionaire. There's a producer class, people who have taken risks and built businesses and created jobs. They are not the people I'm talking to. Even though they may own assets, they may own stock in their own companies, and they may even push to have the stock in their own companies go higher. I'm not talking about them. Those are the people that make the economy turn. Those are the people that hire the working class employees. They're the ones that make the country better and richer. So I'm talking about billionaires like Jeff Bezos and Jensen Huang. They create real jobs. They invest in manufacturing, technology, aerospace, and Amazon is huge. Amazon has warehouses all over the country. They hire drivers. They create a lot of jobs. Whether or not you like Bezos' politics and the messages he sends out through the Washington Post, he creates jobs. He's a net positive for the economy. And there's others like Diane Hendricks, John Morris, the Kohler family. They create American blue-collar jobs. They create factories, supply centers, and trucking networks. So the oligarch class I'm talking about, they don't care about production. At least not here in the United States. They may care about it over in China, where they can send their jobs, their company's jobs. They care about assets and they care about control. At their core, they are against Western civilization. They push modern monetary theory, the so-called magic money tree, because it gives them an excuse for endless government debt spending. Think about it this way. If you had a credit card with no limit, and all you had to do was make the minimum payments every month, that's basically what they're doing. But that credit card is our future. That credit card is a national debt. That's what they're doing. That's where we are. They're not doing it directly. They're doing it through federal government largesse, but they are doing it. They are indeed doing that. The stock market is up 658% over the last 20 years. The people getting rich are not the working class. It's the oligarchs. That's what I'm talking about. So why does it matter? Because debt fuels inflation, and inflation drives up the value of their assets while wiping out your buying power. They support rules that crush local small businesses, taking jobs out of your community. And these small businesses are always replaced by large corporate entities. And these large corporate entities don't need as many employees. They can buy machines, they can create efficiencies, or they just don't care about your customer service. Because they monopolize the market after they drive out the small businesses. That's where you're stuck. And they want to centralize control because that is how they profit. They profit from your struggle. To keep the working class from seeing who the true bosses are, they divide the labor. They divide us with cultural Marxism, identity politics, and climate extremism. They do this as a smokescreen to divide and distract people. They use agitation propaganda, also known as agitprop, and communist language. Things like pride, free Palestine, abolish ICE, whatever's trendy today. Those are distractions from their larger goal, which is weakening Western civilization and replacing it with a totalitarian Marxist state that they can control. Now, the oligarch class enables this because it serves their interests. They're not going to live under Marxism. Only we are. The young Marxist in the street, the No Kings protester, the useful idiot cheering for algae to grow in the DC reflecting pools, they're just pawns. They're just ignorant pawns, just doing what they were taught to do. Oligarchs use media platforms, money networks, and messaging systems to shape their actions and shape others' behavior. Oligarchs use the ideological machine to convince young people to fight against their own interests. The oligarchs control the publishing houses, the television networks, the major newspapers, educational institutions, entertainment, music, social media companies, and virtually every other source of information. They are the filtering mechanism. You are inundated with their propaganda every time you open Apple News or your web browser, drowning out all counterpoints. Even when you search through AI, the information is censored because AIs are only trained to use trusted sources. Trusted sources you didn't choose, trusted sources they chose. It dismisses independent voices as conspiracies, even when they're true. The clearest example of this was how the COVID lab leak theory was dismissed for years, despite massive evidence to the contrary. It wasn't until Tulsi Gabbard released the evidence just before she stepped down as DNI that we got the real truth. And they're still out there denying it. They're still out there denying it. To preserve our civilization, we must expose these hidden networks. Based on financial records, tax filings, and congressional investigations, this oligarch system works through main layer. There are four main layers. The first layer is the globalist technocracy. It is led by wealthy elites, corporate managers like Bill Gates, Larry Fink, Mark Benioff, and Michael Bloomberg. Through groups like the World Economic Forum, this layer sets the larger agenda for society. Instead of passing laws the normal way, they use corporate rules, ESG mandates, digital ID systems, and centralized guidelines to reshape the economy from the boardroom. The next layer is the money pipeline. This is where major foundations, donor networks, and dark money groups move money around and into activist and legal campaigns to support their interests. This includes groups tied to the Soros Open Society Foundation and firms like Arabella Advisors, among others. They move hundreds of millions into nonprofit networks, the Tides Foundation, and progressive legal efforts. The federal government just reported that the oligarch money pipeline includes U.S. NGOs, which hold over $14 trillion in assets. This creates a tax-exempt, politically active empire that is larger than the combined economies of Japan, Germany, and India. It's amazingly large amount of money. And wouldn't it be nice to have that amount of money paying down our national debt? Groups like Democratic Socialists in America and Justice Democrats turn these billionaire-backed agendas into street activism and political campaigns. They claim to be grassroots. They are supported by elite funding networks like the Tides Foundation, which helps move corporate dark money into groups backing far left activists and candidates. In the end, these groups use frustrated young people to push massive government debt spending and cultural division while protecting the global asset class. By funding causes like cash bail abolition, non-prosecution policies, and open borders networks, they weaken civil stability and the rule of law. And that leads to the next layer, the activist and surveillance engine. This layer funds street-level disruptions while also building networks and tools to track and control the public. Networks tied to the CCP use dark money to support radical Marxist Leninist groups, street protests, and campaigns that keep the public divided. At the same time, companies like Palantir build data mining and surveillance systems used by the deep state, and they do it under the label of defending you. The final layer is the establishment political class. This includes mainstream Democratic and Republican Party politicians, along with Silicon Valley elites who present themselves as public servants while benefiting from the same system that's hurting the working class. Instead of answering to voters, these politicians and corporate monopolies help carry out policies written by oligarchs in their think tanks. They use the state and corporate censorship to protect the ruling establishment and lock in the goals of the global oligarch asset class. At the street level, the goal is simple: create chaos, create friction, and keep the working class divided. Neville Roy Singham is one of the clearest examples of this kind of subversion. While living in extreme luxury over in Shanghai, China, Singham has moved over $100 million through dark money channels like the Goldman Sachs Philanthropy Fund, into groups such as the People's Forum in New York City, the Answer Coalition, and Code Pink, all Marxist organizations in the United States. Those groups help build the activist infrastructures that radical Marxist politicians use to gain influence. Singham also uses CCP state media networks to align anti-Western messaging while funding disruption inside the United States outside the normal campaign finance channels. These networks use huge nonprofit systems to change America's legal and cultural foundations. They push open borders and they weaken the justice system. George and Alex Soros' Open Society Foundation acts as a major force behind the restructuring of the U.S. legal system, including support for defund the police and abolish ICE agendas. They poured millions into electing progressive district attorneys who push cash bail abolition and non-prosecution policies. In other words, they're just letting the criminals go. And one of the worst examples of this was, I believe it was last year, when the young Ukrainian girl was murdered on a train on her way home in, I believe it was North Carolina, by a man who had been to jail several times and released several times. That was if you heard that, a pretty big firework that just went off. Getting close to 4th of July, so happy Independence Day, I guess. But Open Society also funds open borders, NGOs, and migration networks, while the Soros family remains protected inside private, fortified estates. So think about that. They are letting people into the country from who knows where. They're letting criminals out on the streets, and they hide on their private estates. While the working class gets to clean up the mess or deal with the mess. Not even allowed to clean up the mess in many cases. That's control. That's what we're talking about. Now, Dustin Moxkovich, the Facebook co-founder, the one you don't hear about. You always hear about Zuckerberg. He presents his giving as data-driven charity, but he has poured more than $200 million into progressive nonprofit networks that openly call for abolishing prisons, getting rid of ICE, and electronic court surveillance. Lauren Powell Jobs and Rob McKay also moved millions, into the Tides Foundation and Southern Poverty Law Center. And we know about the Southern Poverty Law Center. and their fake hate crime hoaxes, giving money to white supremacists to create fake hate crimes because the supply of racism isn't enough to supply their demand. So they're creating fake racism. Now, Tides works like a giant money laundering machine. They take billions in millionaire tech money and send it to activist groups while giving the elites distance from the damage those groups create. So they're hiding where the money comes from. And it's very hard to look that up. It's very hard. But when you have the centralized control technocrats pushing the Great Reset through the World Economic Forum, an initiative designed to use global crisis to bypass national sovereignty and overhaul the global economy, and then transition society into a highly monitored corporate state system where governments and corporations merge to track your every move, control your digital access, and dictate how you live. That sounds a lot like fascism to me. But what's the difference? Marxism, fascism, they all end up in the same place, tyranny. They're both socialist systems. No matter what anybody wants to tell you, they're both socialist systems. Now, Bill Gates is one of the clearest examples of the elite hypocrisy. Now, Gates publicly demands the working class stop eating meat to save the environment. At the same time, he runs the largest corporate farm empire in the U.S. He collects millions in rents from industrial farmers, farms that feed the very food supply he claims is destroying the planet. So he tells you to stop eating meat, but he's growing that food and selling it, probably selling it globally. It's probably only for you. I don't know. It's just hypocritical. That's not all. A long list here when we talk about Bill Gates. Now, Gates also brought convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein into his inner circle for years, even after Epstein was convicted of sex crimes. He used Epstein's connections to Wall Street and Middle Eastern billionaires to help construct a massive global health fund. This proves that the oligarch class can even get in bed with a convicted felon and use him as a middleman if it helps explain and expand their control over global institutions. Now, in his book, The Real Anthony Fauci, which I definitely recommend you read, it's eye-opening, Robert F. Kennedy reveals that Bill Gates and Anthony Fauci, whom Joe Biden pardoned, worked together to push a global vaccine agenda. Now, remember what Gates was using Jeffrey Epstein for. He was building his massive global health fund. Well, these are the type of things that he used it for. He used media fear to suppress cheap treatments while he sold full-price drugs. He conducted unethical drug experiments on American orphans and poor children in Africa. And probably worst of all, maybe, I don't know, you can choose, you can decide yourself. Certainly the most damaging, he funded the dangerous gain-of-function research that was tied to the COVID-19 pandemic. No consequence. Definitely no consequence for Fauci because he was pardoned. Larry Fink, Mr. BlackRock, runs the world's largest asset management company and sits on the WEF board, the World Economic Forum board. Fink used trillions of dollars in capital to force corporate regulation that normally would only happen through the legislative process. He acted as his own and the World Economic Forum's proto-government to force ESG rules across corporate America, using BlackRock's massive stock control to push the boardrooms into compliance. Now, as we said previously, ESG is a social credit score for corporations. That's how they control these corporations, these companies. And since BlackRock has so many assets, they could do it. They can shut companies out of the market. Same thing that China does, by the way. These boardrooms became political weapons used to force radical, progressive, and cultural Marxist rules on companies while systemically punishing domestic energy production by choking off capital to American oil, gas, and coal producers. And this forced a reliance on inefficient, expensive green energy alternatives, which is what they want. And my guess is they don't want it because those alternatives are better. They want it because they can make more money off of that. Because green energy is very expensive. Michael Bloomberg and Mark Benioff both aggressively target the daily lives, energy use, and self-defense rights of ordinary citizens. Benioff weaponized his tech empire to push carbon reduction mandates, and Bloomberg spent hundreds of millions on anti-gun campaigns while personally surrounding himself with armed private security. Now, at the same time, both of those gentlemen soft pedal the Communist Party to protect their lucrative business interests. They don't want to be shut out of the Chinese market. So they play nice. They lie for the Chinese. Michael Bloomberg famously defended Xi Jinping on TV, claiming he is not a dictator, and the CCP listens to the public. He did this while his company relies heavily on selling Bloomberg terminal software in China. That software, I guess that's the leading software Wall Street and global banks depend on for real-time market trading data and control. Now, Mark Benioff of Salesforce partnered with Chinese tech giant Alibaba and bought Time Magazine. In Time Magazine, they took hundreds of thousands of dollars from the CCP to run stories with the China Daily, the Chinese state propaganda paper. Benioff uses Salesforce's power in the tech world to enforce corporate censorship against political movements that do not line up with establishment views. Now, the surveillance state isn't just imported by Marxists. Okay. Self-proclaimed libertarian and anti-establishment figure Peter Thiel runs Palantir. And Palantir is a company that built the very CCP-style data mining surveillance systems used by our federal government, by our deep state. Palantir is spying on us. Yes, it's being used by the military globally, but it's spying on us as well. So instead of using his wealth to build a libertarian future, Thiel's platforms helped create an Orwellian control infrastructure modeled on the Chinese surveillance state. And that is now sold to Western intelligence agencies under the guise of defense. And of course, Peter Thiel appeared in the Epstein files. And Thiel had a years-long alliance with Epstein. Epstein helped him build his exclusive network of tech billionaires, intelligence figures, and power brokers like Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, along with politicians like Ted Cruz and Cory Booker. Now, the private network he formed helped fund transhumanist projects and secure contracts for the military warfare state. It doesn't sound very libertarian to me. You decide. Now, Indian Mukesh Ambani is another WEF board member who has developed the infrastructure to track everyday Americans by partnering with Meta and Google, build mega-scale AI data centers and undersea fiber networks that process the global data streams needed to train and power big tech surveillance algorithms. Both major political parties enabled this corporate takeover. Let there be no doubt. Now, the establishment Democratic Party made a terrible deal with the socialists and cultural Marxists in 1964 with LBJ's Great Society. We talked about that before. Both sides, though, completely ignored the warning of classical liberals who were pushed to the sidelines after 1964. This allowed the cultural Marxists and social welfare socialists to gain power of the Democratic Party through the Great Society and later welfare programs. And they did this while taking money from oligarchs without asking any hard questions. It was all about power, you see. They just wanted to get elected by any means necessary. Oligarchs like Soros, Gates, and Fink fund the Democratic Party and spend billions to shape government policy while protecting their own dark money networks, their own biosecurity projects, and their global capital. And that is politics stripped of values. And the oligarch-owned media go along with it. So you think about how ESG, I guess, is supposed to make our lives better. But that's not what it's about. The social part is not for us, it's for them. Now, funded by globalist oligarchs, grants, and dependent on billions in full cash tuition from wealthy Chinese elites who send their children to American universities and other educational institutions, push critical theory and DEI programs onto the young people of this country. They use them as weapons to silence opposing views and block defenders of Western civilization from getting into faculty positions. They want to keep the faculty of all of these universities ideologically aligned. Can't let any opposing views in, because that's their real weapon. Now, these same universities welcome Chinese Communist Party propaganda outlets, posing as Confucian academies and cultural exchange clubs, actively hosting foreign influence operations while pushing Marxist ideas onto young American college students. The data shows the hard Marxist political shift among Democratic voters is not being driven mainly by racial minorities, but by white, college-educated voters who have been shaped by this academic system. And in New York, the white voters voted 20% higher, 20% more for the socialists than any of the minority groups. It was the whites that pushed them in, white college-educated voters who pushed these socialists in. Now, the Democratic establishment is being attacked from within. And you can expect that in any Marxist movement. The radical Marxists are trying to replace them using the tactics of bullying critics, staging protests, and hijacking local political races. And you may have seen a bit of this. One of the Bay Area Democrats, the establishment Bay Area Democrats, I guess, he's got some pretty radical views. Scott Wiener, who's a gay, by the way, but the young Marxists in San Francisco publicly demanded he maintain fealty, right? They demanded public loyalty to the Marxist message, demanding that he yell "Free Palestine" and denigrate Israel. Now, Wiener's Jewish, so I guess racism doesn't matter when you're a Marxist. Of course it doesn't. I mean, Yuri Bezmenov told us that. All this crap that they're pushing, when the actual oligarchs take over, when the ruling class takes over, they're just going to put a boot to your head. And all this crap that they're spreading is going to go away. It's all going to be about service to the state, service to them. Now, if the Democratic Party had integrity, they would do what the Republicans have done in the past. They would stop backing the Marxists and they would back the Republican candidate. And the Republicans did that when David Duke and Arthur Jones, a couple of white supremacist extremist candidates, tried to run as Republicans. The Republicans cut off support and backed the Democrat candidate. But the Democrats, they don't want to do that. Power is all they care about. It's unfortunate. But I'm talking about the Democratic Party. I'm not talking about the Democratic voters. And once again, this isn't meant to denigrate the people out there, us working class people, because we all have the same problem. This is about the political establishment, the political parties, what they should do. I think the Republicans, Democrats, whatever you want to call yourself, as long as we unite under America First, we can overthrow the system. We can win. But you do have wealthy establishment Democrats like Ro Khanna going along for the ride. Now, Ro Khanna is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He's one of these same people that trades assets to get rich. Just another globalist oligarch. But he was standing by cheering the election of these socialists because he knows the game. He gets it. It's not going to affect him. He's going to profit off of it. So the oligarchs, the Democrats, I should say, Democrats hide the damage they've caused by their tax and spend policies. They blame racism instead of their own failed leadership. So now many young people are disillusioned with the economy because Democrats sold them socialist failure and called it capitalism. They have not followed free market principles for a long time. They haven't followed basic economics for a long time. And now that their policies are failing or have failed, they just blame racism, blame capitalism. All the same bogeyman that the Marxists blame. And how can they be surprised that their young voters are turning to Marxism? They gave them the keys. They told them that was the problem. So this confusion pushes desperate young people who are struggling, we all know that, towards Marxist extremism. And it'll only make the crisis worse. Marxism does not help. You take money from the producers for a while, you get on that sugar high. Once there's no more producers, the burden of producing falls on the back of these young people. The working class. They become slaves. I've discussed this before. That's what's going to happen. That's exactly what the oligarch class wants. They know this. They've seen it happen time and time again, all around the world. That's where we're headed. Let there be no doubt that's where we're headed. We got to show these people, these young people, a different future. We have to be the leaders, the working class. Now, I would argue the establishment Republicans were much worse. They did much more damage. Richard Nixon, it's his fault that this fiat currency system is in place. This fiat currency system that makes the oligarchs rich, that allows them to do these things. Because Richard Nixon cut the U.S. loose from the gold standard. He separated the U.S. dollar from the gold standard. Now, the reason for that was because under LBJ, the economy got so bad that European countries were pulling their gold out of the U.S. coffers. They were taking it home because they didn't trust the U.S. dollar. They didn't trust what was going on because LBJ had run up so much debt with his Great Society and the Vietnam War. And that carried on into the Nixon administration. Of course, it just caused inflation. So Nixon, to protect the United States, he cut the dollar off from the gold standard. What a huge mistake. A huge mistake. And I got to think he knew what he was doing. He had plenty of economists to advise him. And then he also, along with Kissinger, opened up communist China. Now, that was done partly for strategic reasons. We found out that China and Russia, they were not friends. They were not friends. We really came to understand that more after we opened China. But that wasn't the only reason he opened China. The other reason was that American elites saw the chance to make enormous amounts of money in China. All that cheap labor. And he sold out the American working class. Those American rich entrepreneurs sold out the American working class by shipping our jobs overseas. It wasn't just about creating a new market. And now China controls several key global resources that Americans need, including things like medication, antibiotics, diabetes medication, and of course, the things that fuel the tech industry, those rare earth materials, anything electronic. China controls the market on that. And of course, there's the neoconservative warfare state that has helped explode the national debt with their endless foreign interventions that have been very costly, unnecessary, and they're almost always filled with terrible second-order effects. After spending trillions, the U.S. is now far behind China in shipbuilding, and our weakened industrial base cannot produce enough basic war materials to even defeat weaker powers like Iran. We just saw that with the deficiency in missiles when we fought Iran. Iran makes very cheap, very simple missiles. And the United States makes great missiles. They're very expensive, very complicated. And the real problem was during sequestration. There was a deal made between the House of Representatives, controlled by Paul Ryan, and Barack Obama. And that was the Obama administration would cut some of its social programs. And the Republicans would cut defense. They cut deep. One of the things they cut was missile production. And once you take these lines, once you stop producing missiles, these missile lines, these assembly lines for missiles, they go dark. They're not usable. And the companies that are producing the missiles, they don't keep those lines open. They take them down and open them for something else because they don't want to pay to keep something open that's not being used. And so now when we need those missiles, we don't have that infrastructure to build the missiles anymore. It's very slow, time consuming. And once we shoot our magazines empty, we're stuck. And this is Iran. This isn't even a major military power like China or Russia. And it's all tied back to the national debt, taming the national debt. And this problem is going to get worse. And you're going to see more things go away. We're not going to have money to pay for more of these basic things we paid for in the past. It's just going to continue. You've seen the warning signs. Now, the bigger lesson is this. The power elites, they want to tag, track, and monitor every part of your life. We saw this during the COVID lockdowns. The elites during COVID tried to normalize tyranny over society. And I don't know that I need to remind you of how they did it. Forcing experimental vaccines, um, making you wear those stupid masks that didn't work, having these 6 feet rules, um, forcing businesses to close, forcing you to stay in your home, penalizing you if you didn't go along. That was them trying to normalize their control over society. They want to make it hard on you. If you don't want to follow the rules, they're going to make it hard on you. That's what they did. That's going to be their strategy continuing on. They want to control your diet. They want to control your health care. They want to control your energy use. They want to control your speech. The surveillance state infrastructure is being built right now through an AI-powered digital control grid with thousands of internet-connected cameras, audio detection, drones, and a whole assortment of other tools to collect your information without your permission and in violation of the Constitution. Now, the Republicans, I shouldn't say the Republicans, the Congress and the president, our government, just renewed the Patriot Act provisions. And those provisions have gone far beyond their original intent when we're fighting the war on terrorism. They continue to allow collection of your data on behalf of federal, state, and local agencies that have the ability to deprive you of your liberty. And they do that without having a discussion with the people. They kind of hide these things. There's no major media stories about it. You have to go to independent media or be paying attention. The oligarch overlords want a system where you must verify your identity through QR codes, facial scans, or iris scans to control your access to society. This is exactly what the CCP does through cell phones and social credit scores. The Trump-led America First movement had real promise in 2024. It energized young working class people, but it was betrayed by a Republican Congress that refused to pass core policies like the SAVE Act. It was betrayed by the Republican Party and the Trump administration when they failed to execute the deep Doge cuts that Elon Musk's infrastructure found. They deliberately mishandled the Epstein files, and they're still holding information back. And then, of course, we've talked about the slide right back into the neocon, foreign policy, foreign wars in the Middle East with Iran. This is not what we voted for, folks. We need change. We need to come together and change. We cannot afford to ignore these lessons anymore. Unless we build a true classical, liberal, populist unity and find a good leader, somebody who can lead us into the future, our future will be controlled by technocrats serving the globalist oligarch class. But we can resist. There are ways. We can reject the local surveillance grid by showing up at city council meetings and public forums to oppose the contracts for things like speed cameras, red light cameras, surveillance drones, and data centers, where we still have the power to stop them. A lot of these data centers are being built right in people's backyards without their permission. We need to show up, folks. We need to get active. We take back our streets where the working class still has power to organize. We can deploy aggressive, peaceful grassroots populism to counter the oligarch-funded protest machine by organizing public rallies. And I didn't see demonstrations. I didn't say protests. I said rallies, where we get together and we show people what we're about. We're not going to be silly, street protesters dressing up in Halloween costumes, holding up ridiculous signs that have nothing to do with what's really going on. I'm talking about rallies where we have fun, we discuss issues. That was one of Trump's big accomplishments. We should still be doing that. We should still be doing that. We don't need Trump to do that. We just need strong organization, strong America First organization. There's people out there in positions of power that can do that right now. We need to pack our city council meetings. Any of us can do that. And we need to confront those local politicians trying to sell us out. But here's the big thing. Stop assuming that political parties are looking out for you. We need to stop playing team sports because they're not. It's time to drop the partisan brainwashing. We need to face the oligarch machine directly. We need to defend our Western civilization and America First values. We need to call out anti-Western civilization, attacks on our country at every turn. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Oh, by the way, you see I got a new camera. I'm improving the show, so please continue to come back. Maybe I'll have something a little bit different next time too. It's a work in progress, folks, but thank you for supporting. Please subscribe and share the show. Thank you.